Hello and welcome on the Hanamichi, the show that explores Japanese art from Noh theatre to kabuki, bunraku and many other delightful traditional Japanese art forms. I'm currently in Mitsumoto Park in Tokyo. It's a glorious December day, fresh, sunny, perfect temperature, and I'm about to go meet a master Japanese mask maker by the name of Kitazawa Hideta. I first met him in London. He is a fascinating and highly talented artist who specializes in making these masks for Noh plays. And before I go into the particular aspects of Noh masks, I wanted to try and put into some of my own words what Noh theatre is. Noh theatre is a form of traditional Japanese theatre that began in the 14th century medieval period called the Muromachi era. It, in contrast to kabuki, was a form of theatre that was meant for the aristocratic class. So it was certainly not an art form that the lower class people would have seen or performed in. And it's a highly stylized art form that involves dancing, chanting, music, singing. My first ever experience of Noh theatre was in December 2024 in Tokyo. I went to the National Noh Theatre with a friend of mine called Richard Emmett, who was a scholar, writer, practitioner, director of Noh theatre, and one of the foremost experts on Noh. So it was incredible to be watching it alongside someone who knows so much about the art form. In fact, he had written the English translations and the summaries for the Noh theatre. So as I was sat watching the Noh theatre and getting a bit of the background information, this was text that he had written himself. So pretty incredible. My first impression of Noh was that it's on another spectrum in a lot of areas. So for example, costume. Costume is just absolutely exquisite. Never in my life have I seen such an array of beautiful, well-crafted costumes. I mean, silk brocade pieces in these incredibly elaborate, intricate details. The level of craftsmanship that went into the costumes is just unparalleled. So I really appreciated that. The sound world of Noh takes a lot of getting used to. There is something that is just so almost surreal about listening to the music in Noh. So you've got flutes and you've got drums, and then you've got the chanting, and together this creates a very trance-like kind of state where you're kind of being lulled to sleep, but you're also being entranced by it all. It's hard to describe, but the sound world is an incredibly unique and fascinating element of Noh. I love the sense of ceremony that is a big part of Noh. So for example, at the start of the performances, the performers in a sequence would walk through the passageway onto the main stage and then take their seats. And this would all be done in utter silence. There's nothing frivolous in Noh theatre. Everything is so clean and so measured and so precise. Every movement is accounted for, every gesture has a meaning. So in that sense, I think one can describe Noh as really a pure theatre. So while I was in Japan, Kitazawa-san kindly invited me to his studio for a one-to-one workshop on how to make a no mask. I wasn't quite prepared for how meticulous and precise this craft is. There were quite a number of times when he was coming over to my workshop counter and saying, "You've completely done this wrong, you need to start again."
ちょっと待って。これ、I think it's not center. 17だから、85 here?
Okay. I thought I was gonna ask you, but I thought maybe it was.
これね。
Yeah.
This center line is okay, but this, まあ、eraser and again.
Okay.
まあ、small things. はい。
There's a lot of maths involved, a lot of very, very precise millimeter precision marking of where you're going to cut, where the nose and mouth is going to be, how deep you make the insertions for all of these specific points. There's definitely no room in the craft of no mask making for interpretation, at least at my very basic beginner level. So I am not sure that he will be inviting me to be an apprentice of him in the future. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed getting to appreciate how important technique is. So for example, my forearms and my hands were hurting about 5 minutes in to the practice.
Your right arm must be so strong.
I'm not sure.
Because even after a few minutes, I'm already feeling.
これね。Not power, just こうやったら。Long stroke. で、こう。ね。Efficiently. Not power, just ね。Power.
Okay.
This way, don't. Nothing has happened. Just this way. My experience. Check both sides.
Yeah.
If you're curious to learn more about No masks, what they're made from, and what their function is within No theatre, then please check out my interview with Kitazawa-san, which I will link in the description. I've also made a video entitled Behind the Mask, which is part poem, part reflection on my first encounter with Kitazawa-san. I'd like to read for you a passage from one of my favourite books on Japanese theatre. It's called Theatre in the East by Faubion Bowers. And in this passage, Bowers talks specifically about No theatre. He says, No is about 500 years old and the second oldest form of theatre in Japan. It, like Bugaku, owes its miraculous state of preservation to the aristocracy. Still today, an appreciation and understanding of No among Japanese is a mark of breeding. No other theatre demands so much from a spectator, and unlike Kabuki, which has a spontaneous appeal, it requires a certain adjustment and intellectual preparation. It is slow, unbearably so for the Westerner, who is used to a certain raciness in theatre. Its language is incomprehensible even to persons who have a working knowledge of modern Japanese. The Japanese themselves usually follow the written text at a performance in order to understand the play better, much in the same way that people follow a libretto or score at the opera in the West. The texts of No, as is already well known in the West, are superb. There is perhaps no other literature of theatre which is so extensive. There are around 300 plays altogether, and at the same time so uniformly excellent. Visually, No's miming is so symbolic, so pared down to its aesthetic quintessence that it presents a problem. A kimono lying on the stage will represent a sick person. A stab at a sedge hat means the consummation of a revenge. A lift of the mask is a smile. A downward glance indicates tears, and the lifting of the hand, weeping. The moaning and punctuating shrieks of the drummer and the accompanying singers is unfortunately apt to sound like caterwauling to the untutored outsider experiencing No for the first time. The only advice I can give is to bear with these initial obstacles and impressions until No, which is so vastly alien to one's previous sense of the theatre, gradually becomes familiar. It requires time and a little patience to learn the basic essentials of the art. But once this is achieved, and it is a small price to pay, there is no doubt that No has many of the greatest moments of drama in the world today. Merit in the theatre is hard to prove by words, and anyone who has not seen No must simply accept on faith the profound aesthetic reward it presents. Out of the quiet repose of No rises an exaltation. Once the spectator becomes geared to No's rhythms, each lift of the hand, each movement of the tightly stockinged foot, the opening and closing of a fan, the twirling of a long, rustling sleeve, assume immense meanings. Your mind rages with emotions, but they have been aroused almost imperceptibly. You leave the theatre sensitive to the fact that an entire new set of feelings within the human soul has been exercised. You find yourself in a realm of concentrated reality, doubly distilled by the very economy of its theatrical means.